guys, it's Hannah here. I am just popping in to say we have a trigger warning for today's episode, which includes grotesque imagery, body horror, and medical horror. Welcome to Seeing Me on the Screen. I'm your host, Hannah, and each week I am honoured to engage in meaningful conversations with an incredible lineup of guests. From disability rights advocates to artists, filmmakers to everyday heroes, our guests bring a wealth of diverse perspectives that enrich our discussions. Their stories and insights are invaluable as we analyse and uncover the narratives surrounding female disability in mass media. Your voice matters. Email us at seeingmeonthescreenpod@gmail.com with any guest suggestions or topics you'd like us to delve into. Today's guest is Eilidh Hobbs-Tuitea. She studies a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature at Victoria University of Wellington. Welcome to the podcast, Eilidh.
Thank you for having me.
So we can start with the first question there. So could you please share a bit about your personal journey with chronic pain and when did it first begin and how it's evolved over time?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty open about my chronic pain. It happens like late July 2014 because it was barely a month after my birthday. And I remember just starting to feel this horrible pain in my abdomen. And I went to my parents, and my parents are both registered nurses. So they were like, okay, well, maybe it's just some growing pains. Maybe it's just an issue with your period. So they gave me paracetamol, ibuprofen. But then eventually, after a few weeks, and then a few weeks turned into months, it stopped working. And unfortunately, there's been a big issue with people not believing me, and that does include my parents, unfortunately. And that sentiment of not believing me, it wasn't just my parents. It also went to my school administrators, even my general practitioner at the time.
Yeah.
She didn't believe me. I came in with all this pain into her office, and she was like, "Why aren't you at school?" "I have pain." "Well, why don't you just go to school?" The only time that I felt really comfortable in a school setting was literally year 13, the last year of high school. Because at that point, my high school, so there was a dean for every year group, and her response was, it was essentially to try and get me into a health school.
What is the health school?
Health school is basically, it's for when a student has an ongoing condition, maybe they can't make it to school or it makes learning a bit more difficult. But I am an incredibly social person. I didn't want to have to be separated from my friends because a part of why I loved school was that I could get to talk to people and I could have hangouts with my friends and I could learn, and I loved learning. Thankfully, my mom, after a while, she kind of understood that, hey, this is a really big issue. She realized it was real. My mom just took me to the emergency department. And as soon as we told them our symptoms, the nurse went away, came back, and I suddenly had a referral to almost every part of the hospital. It was because then we could try and figure out what it was. It was kind of a process of elimination.
Yeah, I was going to ask whether there were specific memories or any moments that stand out to you in relation to your chronic pain, any particular memories that have been oh, this is not normal. How have these experiences impacted your trust and confidence in seeking, medical help within hospital environments?
It is kind of hard now. I will say there was another part where I eventually ended up in pediatrics, outpatient, which was great. I had an incredible pediatrician, but there was nothing they could do. They were incredible at what they did, but the way they relayed that to me was that I needed to do something. It was full medical pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It was really weird. So I've kind of grown this, I'll do it myself, I guess.
So your dismissals and the complications that come with the lack of response from the medical institutions, what steps do you think can be taken to improve healthcare understanding of chronic pain? In a perfect world, what would you offer?
There would be more research.
Yeah.
I actually tried to do a fun little research project for an academic writing course I did. And I ended up, yeah, I was like, is there any gender differences or sex differences, I should say, between chronic pain? And I found this insane international compilation like article. But the main issue was that at the end of the article, even though they did say in certain like post-op or head or back pain or whatever, there were certain variations. But at the end of the article, they concluded that we don't know, which I didn't like. It was interesting to see them clearly lay out all this insane compilation of research and then for them to say they don't know. But my issue is that it was all done under the umbrella of chronic pain, and it wasn't for the specific types of pain.
So what's the difference?
The difference is that if you just say chronic pain, a lot of people don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Right.
A lot of reactions I've gotten are like, oh my God, oh wow, that's so what's going on? As a woman in the healthcare system, it is hard to find a lot of resources to help.
Yeah.
Because as I've gotten older, I've like talked to a lot of other women and like girls my age and all that jazz. A lot of them have experienced just general pain. And when I've like tried to ask for help, there wasn't really a lot they could do for me. I would encourage people to research it in your own time. I'm not like, I'm an English literature student. I am not a medical professional. Yes. There needs to be more attention paid to patients, and especially with like the treatment of patients.
So, in your opinion, what are some common misconceptions or stereotypes that media often perpetuates about women living with chronic pain, if there's any?
Unfortunately, due to the fact that, one, chronic pain is kind of an umbrella term, there technically isn't any representation. Yes, there are like depictions with women with like chronic illnesses. I do think that it is kind of getting better with representation for women with illnesses. I know there's like a lot of representation when it comes to cancer because it's a horrific disease. It's definitely something that everyone knows about. So for like big diseases like cancer, I think there is some representation for that. I don't think there's a lot of representation for women that are ill.
I mean, unless certain movies when a woman does have like some kind of, she's always like on her deathbed and it's always to like aid the main character.
Yes, like a side plot. A lot of times the depiction, and this is just kind of an issue with the depiction of women and illness in media, it's kind of depicted as a woman very weak, damsel-y, or Victorian era.
Yeah.
Fainting couches.
Right.
At the time, it was horrific, like epidemic that women were so sick. That did end up becoming like a kind of canon in a lot of literature that like women would faint a lot and they were so ill and sick and if they talk about a rare one, I feel like that's only for like medical procedurals. They'll be like, oh wow, we had no idea it could have been this all along or something.
And it's magically cured somehow because plot.
yeah a lot. That's also a big issue with like curing someone who's sick.
Yeah. If you say that, I'm going to start talking about A Change of Habit with Elvis Presley. Change of Habit is this movie with Elvis Presley in it. So there's this young girl and she's autistic, and it's like one of the earliest female representations of autism. So there's a lot of like harmful rhetoric about like her not, growing up to be a lady because the girl is nonverbal. So Elvis Presley at the very end of the film like holds this girl in his arms and has her scream her autism out. It's not just you in terms of like curing and like that aspect of illness. It's also with other disabilities too. And like of course the it's like happy music, the swirly happy like symphony music. Oh my goodness, she can talk again. And the first thing she says is, I love you. funny because she's saying it to this random Elvis Presley guy. Do you believe that many creators, producers, people behind the table have a responsibility to accurately represent women with chronic illnesses, considering the impact their portrayals have on shaping public perception of them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I speak from a perspective of someone who has chronic pain. I would want to be represented respectfully, as everyone should. And with me, I am very intersectional. I'm half New Zealand European, half Samoan. So like race has come into my life. I do think it just kind of comes down to general representation.
Yeah, it's not intersectional.
Like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
And when it is, there's some kind of tragedy to it. Like the bury your gays trope.
Yeah.
Or the person of color dies first.
Yeah.
Mostly the Black person.
How can individuals with chronic pain like yourself use media platforms and storytelling to raise awareness and advocate for better representation?
I don't necessarily feel an urge to like find representation for chronic pain. I know that's weird because I'm advocating for it. I would like to see it, but I just don't really want to get involved in that. Mostly because I already have so much in my life going on. I kind of have to worry about myself first and my health. I've had to put my health in front of a lot of opportunities, like even my education at some points, because otherwise I would be sacrificing myself so I could go to school, and that's not healthy. A lot of my life has been kind of taken up by chronic pain. If they are up to it, I would be so excited for someone to like spread their story, make a TV show, write a book, because like it's not like they would be incapable of doing that. I'm just saying that with chronic pain or any kind of chronic illness, it's so hard to get through a day. But if they can find the drive within themselves and they feel safe enough to bring that representation forward and like strive and advocate for that, I'd be so happy.
Yeah, well, speaking of advocating for yourself, we have one of your magical, amazing, harrowing
poem. Bleeding noses and hemorrhaging cartilage, I find my home in this gore. Cruelty never felt so sweet, abandonment better than denial. The nurses vanish as we rot in the waiting room. My kindred souls, vomiting bile and vital organs. Their examination begins. The dish is full, color of blackened coal ash in your mouth, tongue withered and pleading for resuscitation. A girl sits with her mother and feels her womb begin to rot. 14, so young and wishing for a broken arm. Physical, tangible, no ethereal mist or wisps of whimpers. Windows open, paintings come, and television of Tupperware, while death floats in tanks.
I'm doing...
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, slime poly.
God. I both love and hate this poem. Mostly, I love it because it's the best piece of writing I've written about my chronic pain that like just kind of sets out everything, like my entire journey kind of in my on my mindset around chronic pain. Also, the death floats in tanks, and the reason it's called fish tanks is because when I was younger, I remember hearing that when a fish starts dying, like a goldfish or something, their scales start turning white. A white scaled fish always kind of seemed like an embodiment of death to me, which is weird and morbid, but I don't know, it made sense to me.
So how does the portrayal of physical pain and tangible suffering of your lived experience contrast with the ethereal and intangible aspects of emotional pain in your poem? So what emotions were you trying to evoke through these contrasting elements between physical and the ethereal?
So that kind of ties into the fact that my condition as my chronic pain condition is mostly invisible. The only time you really see it is if like you saw my pain medication in my cabinet, or if you saw me like in physical pain. I've had it for almost 10 years now, So I've gotten really good at like dealing with it and also hiding it. Like this was just the poem was how I kind of viewed myself, like my medical journey.
I mean, I think that, your extremities, when you describe it in such a visceral way, contextualizes it for the person that doesn't experience it. When I was reading it, I was like, oh, she's trying to make more sense to people that don't suffer with chronic pain. Like an equilibrium between those that suffer and those that don't have the
It's definitely that. What's important to me about this poem is that it feels like proof.
Yeah.
And it's a poem. It's not necessarily like this isn't a medical document signed by a surgeon or like a pediatrician or a gynecologist or whatever. It's not like an official sign off, but the fact that it was my truth. Speaking my truth. Sorry. It was really important to me at the time because other people who had like physical, visual, like illnesses, they were the ones who were prioritized first. And because I was able to sit quietly in my chair in the waiting room, then they were like, okay, she'll be fine.
Socialization of women. Woo.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it's the way the world is. But that's precisely why we need to advocate more. So
yeah, absolutely.
So looking back on your poem, how do you feel about it now? Has your perspective or understanding of the themes and imagery evolved since you first created it?
I have gone to therapy since I wrote this poem, but how I feel about the poem in general, as I've said, I think it's pretentious. I think it's a bit much. I think it's edgy. But I do think it did exactly what I wanted it to do. It was efficient in its message of, hey, I'm not doing well. And this is how I kind of viewed my world at the time. Not that I was literally not that I see the world in like some kind of Tim Burton horror situation. My view of the world is not Victorian England. It's just the fact that I was able to put it down in a way that I thought it is decent and it is kind of beautiful in what it says, to me at least, and that's all that matters. It does hold a special place in my heart. I have read it during my therapy sessions.
How did that go?
Yeah. Woo! But I am really happy with what I wrote because it was honestly like the truth. It was how I viewed my time in the health system. Not that it has ended. Like, I have chronic pains. I love the poem for what it is, which is kind of a snapshot of how I felt when I wrote it. Absolutely a snapshot. And the fact that it's just real. The overall thing that I want to convey is that 1, research, 2, general respect. Because if someone says, I am in pain, the first instinct should not be don't believe them. It should be, okay, what do we do about it? Which unfortunately was not extended to me a lot. I'm not like an author or anything. I'm just trying to get through life. And I think if I just encourage anyone to get through life.
And your lived experience is value. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate your amazing poem and your life experience with chronic pain.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Seeing Me on the Screen. We hope you found our discussion insightful and thought-provoking. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify for more engaging discussions about female disability in movies, TV shows, theatre and beyond. Remember that your voice matters. Email us at seeingmeonthescreenpod@gmail.com with any guest or topic suggestions. Thank you again for listening to Seeing Me on the Screen. Until next time, let's keep sharing untold stories and work towards a world where everyone can see themselves represented on the screen.